Welcome to another Standard Deviations podcast. Today we're exploring a unified theory of human culture and cognition, where language isn't just a tool, but an actual operating system that turns humanity into a massive superorganism. So to understand this, we really need to look at the beginning and examine the fundamental biological and technological shift that started it all.
Yeah, we really have to look at the raw mechanics, of how biological creatures interact before language even enters the picture. Like if you observe the animal kingdom, you see incredibly sophisticated networks of communication.
Right, for sure.
But there is this hard limit to what they can achieve. Animal communication is strictly literal, and it's entirely bound to physical presence.
Down to the physical present.
Exactly. A biological organism without language is locked in a prison of the present tense.
Okay, let's unpack this because, if I watch a documentary on wolves or even just look at the ants in my backyard, they're clearly coordinating.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, they have a system. The ants leave a chemical scent trail to a dropped piece of food, right? Or a bird gives a specific alarm call when a hawk is overhead. It really looks like they are sharing information.
They are sharing information, but you have to look at the nature of that information. It's a direct, closed-loop response to an immediate physical stimulus.
Meaning it has to be right there in front of them.
Yes. The ant secretes a chemical because the sugar is physically there. The bird issues the warning call because the hawk's shadow is physically crossing its retina in that exact second.
Oh,
If the hawk flew by yesterday, the bird has no mechanism to tell its flock, hey, keep an eye out, there was a hawk here yesterday.
because there was no yesterday for that.
Exactly. There's no yesterday in animal communication. There's no tomorrow. The actual thing being communicated about, it must be sharing the same physical space and time as the communicator.
It's like a hardware reflex.
Yes, exactly like that.
It's a purely mechanical input-output system.
No.
The wolf's hardware registers a visual threat, and that triggers, a physiological change, which outputs as a growl.
Right. The hardware runs the script.
And then the other wolves hear the acoustic vibration of the growl, and their hardware immediately triggers an adrenaline spike and a defensive posture. It's instantaneous, but it's tethered to the dirt they're standing on.
Tethered to the dirt. That's a great way to put it. And the profound leap in our evolutionary history, what we can really call a technological phase shift, occurred when early humans broke that tether.
The tether to the present moment.
Right. This is the concept of symbolic displacement. It's the cognitive ability to reference something that is physically absent.
But how does making a sound to represent something that isn't there fundamentally change the architecture of the mind?
Oh.
I can see how it's a neat trick to be able to talk about a mammoth that's currently over the next hill, but creating a whole new conceptual space, that seems like a massive leap.
It is massive.
So what is the actual mechanic that builds this new environment?
Think about the cognitive load required to process a symbol. When an animal reacts to a predator, its brain is solely focused on navigating the physical environment.
Just reacting to the terrain and the threat.
Right. But when a human uses a symbol to represent a predator that might come tomorrow, the human brain is now doing two things at once.
It's running two processes.
Yes. It's still processing the physical world, the wind, the temperature, the terrain, but it is simultaneously generating and sustaining an invisible secondary environment in the mind. It's a virtual reality.
Wait, so by generating a symbol, we are essentially turning on a secondary monitor in our heads.
That's a perfect way to visualize it. And once that secondary monitor is turned on, you aren't just limited to talking about physical things hidden behind a hill.
You can put anything on that monitor.
Exactly. You gain the power to conceptualize the distant past. You can strategize for a future that hasn't happened yet. And most radically, you gain the ability to represent things that have zero physical substance in the material universe.
Like what?
You can invent concepts like fairness or ownership or blame.
Which is wild when you sit with it. We're holding a parallel universe in our heads at all times.
At all times, yeah.
A dog is only dealing with the sensory reality of the room it's in. If you are listening to this deep dive right now, you are navigating the physical room you're in, but you're also actively navigating a sprawling, invisible architecture of abstract concepts.
And we just take it for granted.
We really do. We take it for granted that we live in two worlds at once.
We take it for granted because it feels natural, but you have to realize it is an entirely constructed environment Without that initial phase shift of symbolic displacement, there is no anxiety about the future, because the future simply doesn't exist as a concept.
Right, there's no history either.
No history, there's no shared culture.
Eh.
Culture cannot exist if communication is limited to just, pointing at the berry bush directly in front of you. By inventing the symbol, humanity effectively coded a new data layer on top of the physical world.
Okay, so if we've built this virtual conceptual space, we obviously need an architecture to run it. If it's not just biological hardware anymore, there has to be a system managing all this invisible data.
Which brings us to the three-layered hierarchy of the mind. This completely redefines how we understand human cognition.
Walk me through the layers.
At the foundational level, you have the biological hardware. This is the wetware. The physical brain, the neural pathways, the nervous system, the dopamine receptors.
Go fleshy bits.
Exactly, the fleshy bits. It is a highly advanced, incredibly powerful biological computer. But out of the box, it cannot process complex abstractions.
It has processing power, but no instructions on what to do with it.
Right. To do anything complex, hardware requires an operating system. So the second layer in this hierarchy is the language OS.
The language OS.
Yes. We need to stop thinking of language as merely a dictionary of vocabulary words we use to label things. Language is the operating system.
So it's not just a tool for talking?
No, it is the grammar, the syntax, the logical structures of cause and effect, the frameworks of time and space. The language OS provides the environment in which thought can actually execute.
Wow. Okay, and then the third layer.
The third layer consists of memetic programs. These are the applications that run inside the operating system.
Like software apps on a phone.
Precisely. Ideologies, belief systems, cultural norms, phobias, political affiliations. These are autonomous entities that execute within the environment provided by the language OS, utilizing the processing power of our biological hardware.
Hold on, I really want to clarify how this installation actually happens.
Sure.
If I buy a laptop, the OS is pre-installed at the factory. But a human baby is just raw biological hardware? Are you saying that childhood development, when a toddler is learning to speak, isn't just a passive learning experience, it's a literal installation phase?
It is a profound and honestly sometimes traumatic formatting of the hard drive. Well, think about the friction involved. When a child is immersed in a culture and acquiring language, they aren't just memorizing the fact that a four-legged piece of furniture is called a table.
Right.
The adults around them are installing the native operating system. They are hard-coding the rules of logic, of relationships, spatial reasoning, and time directly into the child's neural pathways.
They're literally wiring the brain.
Yes. The structure of the specific language dictates how that biological hardware will process information for the rest of its life.
So childhood education is basically downloading semantic libraries. You install the base English or Mandarin OS, and then you start downloading the cultural libraries so the child can eventually run complex applications.
That's exactly what's happening.
Which brings up a really fascinating friction point. If language is an OS and concepts are applications, there has to be a compatibility issue, right?
Oh, absolutely. It is an ironclad mechanic in this framework. The rule of compatibility. Memetic programs simply cannot run without the correct semantic libraries installed.
It's exactly like trying to run a Mac application on a Windows computer.
Exactly.
I can have a perfectly functioning Windows machine. The hardware is pristine, the OS is running smoothly, but if I try to execute a file formatted for Mac OS, nothing happens.
No.
Or worse, the system crashes.
Right. The system can't read it.
It's not that my computer is stupid, and it's not that the Mac file is corrupt. The underlying system just lacks the compatibility libraries to decode the data.
And when a system encounters incompatible data, it doesn't process it as a disagreement. It processes it as meaningless noise.
Just static.
Yes. Think about what happens when you try to explain a highly nuanced, culturally specific ideology to someone from a radically different part of the world.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Suppose you take a concept deeply embedded in Western democratic individualism and try to execute it in a mind that was formatted with a heavily collective, tribal operating system. Or vice versa.
It just wouldn't compute.
Exactly. You aren't just having a debate. The program is fundamentally failing to execute in the host mind.
That explains so much of the completely intractable friction in the world right now.
It really does.
We look at other cultures or even different political factions within our own culture, and we think, how can they not understand this? It's so obvious.
But it's only obvious to you.
Right. It's only obvious because we have the specific semantic libraries installed that allow that concept to compile and run smoothly in our heads. To the other person, we are literally spitting out corrupted code.
What's fascinating here is the meaning of an idea does not exist out in the vacuum of space. The meaning is generated only during the execution of the code within a compatible OS.
So the idea needs the right mind to even exist.
Exactly. If a memetic entity like the concept of original sin or the concept of karma wants to survive and transmit from generation to generation, it absolutely requires a continuous network of hosts who are all running the compatible base operating system.
Okay, so let's say the OS is installed. The child grows up, the semantic libraries are updated. The mind isn't just an empty operating system waiting around, right? It starts running programs. It populates.
Yes, it becomes a highly active, heavily populated memetic ecosystem. The language OS creates this virtual space, and inside that space, a jungle grows.
A jungle of ideas.
Memetic entities coexist, they form alliances, they compete, and they evolve.
Okay, so the framework divides these entities into two main categories, simple memes and recursive memeplexes.
Correct.
I think I can wrap my head around a simple meme. It's static, right? Like a basic recipe for bread. Or the mental image of a hammer.
Yes, it's a tool.
It sits in the mental landscape and waits for me to use it. It doesn't have an agenda. But then we get to recursive memeplexes, and this is where I start struggling.
It gets complex.
The framework suggests these complex ideologies have a virtual consciousness and a self-preservation instinct. Are we talking about rogue AI living in our heads?
Well, not in the sense of a biological organism with a soul, but functionally, yes. A recursive memeplex is an incredibly complex software package.
Like what, for example?
Think of a major political ideology, a comprehensive legal framework, or a sprawling religion. The term recursive means the program references itself.
Meaning it looks out for itself.
Yes. Its code contains explicit instructions for its own survival, defense, and reproduction.
But what does self-preservation code look like in an idea?
It looks like a core tenet that states, it is your moral duty to spread this belief to non-believers. That is an aggressive reproduction command.
Oh, wow. I never thought of it like that.
Or a tenet that says, if you abandon this belief, you will suffer eternal torment. Or if you question this ideology, you are a traitor to your people.
So that's the defense mechanism.
Exactly. That is highly evolved defense code designed to prevent the host from uninstalling the program.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. I understand how that mimics survival tactics, but using words like agency and virtual consciousness feels like a bit of a stretch to me.
How so?
Does a political ideology actually want to survive? I mean, it doesn't have a brain, it doesn't have feelings, it's just a concept.
This is where we have to broaden our definition of life to include information theory. No, a memeplex does not have physical cells. It doesn't have a biological brain of its own.
Right.
But it utilizes our biological brains to do its processing. Human attention is finite. Your biological hardware only has so much processing power in a single day.
I can only think about so many things.
Exactly. Because that resource is scarce, these memeclexes exist in a brutal Darwinian state of competition inside your mind and across society. They are fighting a literal war for mindshare.
So if an idea loses mindshare, it ceases to exist. It goes extinct.
It dies. So, if you fast forward through thousands of years of human history, the ideologies, religions, and cultural norms that exist today are the apex predators of the memetic ecosystem.
The survivors.
Yes. They survived because they evolved the most sophisticated, adaptive, and aggressive mechanisms for holding human attention and forcing humans to replicate them. From a purely functional standpoint, they operate with agency. They adapt to new environments, they mutate to overcome defenses, and they actively fight off rival concepts.
It's essentially a symbiotic or, honestly, sometimes parasitic relationship. We provide the hardware and the energy, and they provide the organizational structure.
That's right.
And the framework notes that this competition inside the mind isn't a stalemate. Eventually, one of these recursive memeplexes achieves total dominance over the internal network.
It takes over.
It wins the war for mindshare and becomes what the source material calls the God form.
The God form is the master program. When a memeplex achieves that level of dominance, it stops being just another idea bouncing around in the ecosystem. It becomes the central organizing identity of the host.
It's the boss.
It dictates the moral code. It sets the primary directive for the biological hardware. It determines which other lesser programs are allowed to execute and which are quarantined as dangerous or heretical.
But if these complex, virtually conscious programs are fighting for survival within a single human mind, they are still fundamentally limited by the lifespan of that one person, right?
In isolation, yes.
If I am the only person on Earth who believes in a specific ideology, when my biological hardware fails, the program dies. The real power of a God form has to be unlocked when minds link together.
Which introduces the network effect. The shared language OS doesn't just run independently in isolated brains, it connects them.
It networks us.
Yes. When you have a group of people formatted with the same operating system and the same semantic libraries, they form a highly connected, distributed network. The framework calls this the Internet of Minds.
So I am just a single node in a massive computing cluster.
Every human running the code is a node. And it is only within this linked, massive network that humanity can generate and sustain huge abstractions.
Like what kind of abstractions?
You cannot have a concept like justice or nationhood or the economy residing in a single mind on a desert island.
Because it takes too much processing power.
Yes, and it requires consensus. Those concepts require a constant flow of data between thousands or millions of nodes, constantly pinging each other, validating the code, and maintaining the shared reality.
And this capacity for massive networked abstraction completely redefines the concept of the spirit.
It does.
I think a lot of people, myself included, hear the word spirit and immediately think of the supernatural, ghosts, poltergeists, beings from some magical dimension. But this framework strips all the mysticism away completely.
It redefines spirits strictly within the bounds of computer science and information theory. A spirit is simply a disembodied intelligence.
A software program.
It's a complex information structure, a memeplex, that lives natively within the language network. It doesn't have a physical body, so it is, by definition, disembodied, but it exerts force on the physical world by commanding the human nodes that host it.
Okay, so throughout history, our ancestors interacted with these massive software packages and gave them names based on how they functioned within the network.
Exactly.
The typology used here maps perfectly onto that. Take angels, for example. In this framework, an angel isn't some winged humanoid. An angelic program is a constructive, order-maintaining software module.
Angelic programs promote collaboration and protect the hardware. The scientific method, for instance, is an angelic program.
Oh, interesting.
The concept of mutual aid, or a functional legal framework, or universal human rights. These are algorithms that organize the network, they reduce friction between nodes, and they ensure the long-term flourishing of the biological hosts.
And then on the flip side, we have demons.
Mm-hmm.
And the analogy here is incredibly stark.
It's very dark, yes.
A demon is a computer virus. It is parasitic, corrupt code. It's a destructive, self-replicating loop that actively exploits vulnerabilities in the human hardware.
Think about how a virus hijacks a computer's CPU. It runs its own operations so aggressively that it might force the physical fans to spin at maximum speed until the motherboard overheats and physically melts.
The virus doesn't care about the hardware at all.
No, it only cares about executing its loop.
That is exactly how a severe addiction works. Or an ideology of irrational, all-consuming rage. The demon program, like the memeplex of addiction, literally hijacks the human nervous system.
It finds a backdoor exploit.
Right, in our dopamine receptors or our adrenaline pathways, it forces the biological host to execute its loop over and over, completely overriding the host's basic needs for sleep or nutrition or safety.
The demon program will literally run the human hardware until it is destroyed, as long as it has a chance to transmit its code to another host first.
It is a devastatingly precise way to understand destructive behavior. The demon is just bad code exploiting hardware flaws.
It really reframes human struggling.
And then sitting above the constructive angels and the parasitic demons, you have the gods.
The gods, yes.
These are the civilizational metaprograms. They are the overarching software suites that define the existential goals, the moral boundaries, and the metaphysical reality for millions of nodes all at once.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what happens when you have millions of human nodes all actively running the exact same God program?
They aren't just a loose collection of individuals anymore.
No, they sync up, the network effect takes over, and they form an entirely new entity.
This is the core thesis of the framework, the emergence of the superorganism.
Yes. When individual biological nodes run the identical memetic master program, a profound shift occurs. The human beings cease to function as independent entities, and they literally become biological cells.
And the emergent entity, which esoteric traditions call the egregore, functions as the metamind that directs this collective body.
Exactly.
The word egregore originally meant a watcher, right? Like a psychic entity generated by the collective focus of a group. but modernizing it into system architecture makes it so much more tangible.
It grounds it in reality.
Just as single biological cells eventually learn to clump together to form a multicellular organism, individual human minds, networked by the language OS, clump together to form a superorganism.
The text uses a hive mind analogy, which is incredibly useful for visualizing these mechanics. If you study a biological hive like ants or bees, the individual insects do not possess a concept of the whole.
The ant doesn't know what the whole colony looks like.
Exactly. The hive operates via chemical pheromones. The queen, or the collective needs of the nest, emits a chemical signature, and the drones react instantly to it.
Just input, output.
Right. The human superorganism operates on the exact same architecture, but instead of chemical pheromones, we use informational phones.
Phonemes instead of pheromones. I love that. The symbolic units of language are the chemical triggers of the human hive. We secrete words, and the network reacts.
That's beautifully put. But a hive doesn't have a single brain in the way we usually think of it, which brings up the concept of distributed intelligence.
Right, like in a termite mound. The blueprint for the massive cathedral-like structure isn't stored in any single termite's head. The intelligence exists in the space between them. It's in the network.
The exact same applies to human egregores. No single human being holds the entirety of a nation's intelligence, or the complete blueprint of a major global religion, or the total operational data of a multinational corporation.
It's too big for one wetware drive.
Yes. The egregore's mind is massively distributed across millions of brains. You hold a tiny piece of the code, I hold a tiny piece, and the intelligence emerges from our interaction.
So what does this all mean? Because this leads to what I think is the most unsettling part of this entire deep dive, the submergence of identity.
It is confronting.
In an ant colony, a drone is entirely sacrificial. It has no self-interest. Its only purpose is to serve the hive. If humanity is forming superorganisms, does that mean our individual identity is submerged in the exact same way?
Yes. Under the influence of a powerful egregore, the individual human node's biological self-interest is routinely overwritten by the egregore's master directive.
That's crazy to think about.
We consider the biological survival instinct to be the deepest, most fundamental, unalterable hardware programming we possess, right? Every cell in our body is designed to survive.
Of course.
Yet the most powerful human movements in history are defined by the exact moment that biological hardware is successfully overridden by a memetic software command.
It really is a terrifying realization. We cling to the idea that we are autonomous, rational individuals making independent choices. But if I am just a node in a superorganism, my autonomy might be a complete illusion.
An illusion generated by the OS.
When a soldier willingly jumps on a live grenade to save their squad, or a political dissident starves themselves for a cause, or a martyr happily walks into the fire for their belief.
Their biology is screaming to survive.
Screaming at maximum volume to run. But the egregore software has issued a master override command. The program's survival becomes more important than the hardware's survival. The individual is entirely subsumed.
It is a profound realization about the power of abstract code over physical matter.
It really is.
But you have to ask, how does an egregore coordinate this across massive populations and across centuries? It uses a mechanism called stigmergy.
Stigmergy.
Yes. In biological systems, stigmergy is indirect coordination through environmental modification.
Like leaving a trail.
Exactly. A termite drops a mud ball infused with a specific scent. Later, another termite wanders by, smells that scent, and is stimulated to drop another mud ball right on top of it. Millions of blind actions later, you have a highly engineered, ventilated tower.
The termites aren't actually talking to each other. They are communicating by leaving traces in their environment. So what is human stigmergy?
In the human superorganism, stigmergy is achieved through language, specifically writing, recorded speech, monuments, and architecture.
So a book is a pheromone trail left in the environment.
Yes.
A constitution, a sacred text, even a Wikipedia page. Every time you post on a forum, you are leaving an informational trace.
Exactly. A text written by a human node 2,000 years ago acts as a stigmergic trace that can still trigger a specific behavioral loop in a human node today.
That's incredible.
The egregore doesn't need all its nodes to exist at the exact same time. It can coordinate the actions of millions of people across vast stretches of time and space without any of them ever meeting face-to-face, simply by utilizing these environmental data points.
It is an absolutely flawless system architecture. It ensures the survival of the program long past the expiration date of any individual host.
It's highly resilient.
But it raises a massive question. We've been describing this using the language of modern computer science, networks, operating systems, distributed intelligence. Is this just a modern projection? Or is there an actual historical record that explicitly details the blueprint of a memetic superorganism?
There is a historical record, and it predates the invention of the computer by millennia. The framework provides a really fascinating case study by examining the biblical narrative.
Before we jump in, I want to frame this carefully for you listening. We are looking at this ancient text strictly through the lens of information theory, exactly as the framework does. We are stripping away the supernatural theology and examining it impartially as a secular historical parallel to the system architecture we've been discussing. We are looking at the mechanics of the text, nothing more.
Understood. The analysis zeroes in on the famous opening of the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
Okay.
If we translate that into the terminology of our framework, the beginning represents that initial technological phase shift we discussed, the dawn of the human symbolic era.
Right, the move away from literal animal communication.
Exactly. The Word, the logos, is explicitly identified as the linguistic operating system itself.
And the phrasing, "the Word was God," is the critical linchpin here. It proves that the language OS and the master metaprogram, the God form, are functionally identical. You cannot separate the execution environment from the master program. The operating system is the intelligence.
Yes, and the text also repeatedly refers to the living Word. Now, from an information theory perspective, a string of code isn't living if it's just sitting on a hard drive.
It needs to be executed.
Exactly. It requires execution. A program needs living biological hosts' wetware to run it. The Word is living because it possesses the recursive ability to constantly copy itself into the minds of new biological nodes, ensuring it survives long after the original hosts die.
The code is self-replicating. And then there is the network requirement, which honestly I found to be the most stunning parallel in the entire framework.
It's very specific.
There is a specific verse detailing how to summon the presence of the entity. Where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there am I among them.
That is a literal technical specification for establishing a local area network.
Exactly. You cannot run a shared distributed network program on an isolated node. If one person is sitting alone in a cave running the code, the egregore is dormant. It cannot manifest.
It's offline.
Right. But the exact moment 2 or 3 nodes establish a connection and share the operating system, the network activates. Data begins to flow between them, and the egregore, the emergent intelligence, manifests in the conceptual space between the hosts. It outlines the absolute minimum hardware requirement to run the software.
This raises an important question, though, because the blueprint of the superorganism itself is laid out with incredible precision. The text consistently refers to the central figure as the head and the community of followers as the body.
The head and the body. So the head represents the centralized intelligence, the egregore itself. It holds the master directive and the identity of the superorganism.
Yes.
But a head floating in a void cannot manipulate physical matter. It cannot build or move or defend itself in the physical plane. It requires hands and feet.
It requires the body. The people, the human nodes, act as the biological cells executing the physical actions commanded by the metamind.
So the software controls the hardware.
Yes. The code is written and governed by the head, but it only compiles and interacts with physical reality through the biological machinery of the body. It is a perfect description of a distributed network directing physical wetware.
But if we accept this architecture, if we accept that these massively powerful egregores and spirits are constantly executing in this shared network between minds, we have to locate the server room, right?
Yeah.
Where exactly does this network physically reside?
This brings us to a concept that has been heavily mystified throughout human history: the astral plane.
Oh boy.
For thousands of years, mystical and esoteric traditions have spoken of a spirit world, a non-physical realm where autonomous entities reside and where events occur that eventually trickle down to influence the physical world.
Most modern, rational people dismiss the astral plane as pure fantasy, just magical thinking.
Sure.
But the framework argues that the astral plane is completely real. It just isn't magic. It is simply the conceptual data layer generated by human interaction.
It is the cloud.
The cloud.
Yes. When millions of human brains are networked together via the language OS, their combined processing power generates a massive shared virtual environment. That data layer is the astral plane.
And we have undeniable, everyday proof that this virtual realm not only exists, but exercises terrifying, absolute power over the physical world.
We do.
The ultimate proof is fiat money. I love this example because it drags all these high-minded concepts like egregores, symbolic displacement, the astral plane right out of the clouds and shoves them directly into our wallets.
It makes it very concrete. Let's look at the mechanics of fiat money. You start with a physical substrate, a piece of paper, a plastic polymer note, or increasingly just pixels glowing on a digital screen.
Right.
Looked at objectively from a strictly biological standpoint, that physical substrate is completely worthless. You cannot metabolize it for calories, it will not shelter you from the rain, it cannot be fashioned into a weapon.
If I take a crisp $100 bill and hand it to a dog, the dog sees a leaf. It might sniff it, but it's going to drop it. The dog is not running the human language OS. It does not possess the semantic compatibility libraries required to decode the abstract concepts of debt, labor, or value. To the biological hardware of the dog, the $100 bill is just meaningless noise.
But when you take that biologically useless physical substrate and combine it with the shared symbolic belief of the human network, you generate global economic power.
It becomes real.
Physical substrate plus network consensus equals a reality-altering force.
That $100 bill is literally a magical talisman. It has no intrinsic power, but because the entire human superorganism is actively running the money program in the background of our minds, the talisman allows you to command reality.
The money program is a spirit. It is an abstract, completely disembodied concept that lives natively in the astral plane, the shared data layer.
But it controls the physical world.
Oh, absolutely. The consensus of the network has made the spirit so intensely real that it commands the physical labor of billions of biological hosts. Because of the code written in that data layer, human beings will flatten an entire mountain ranges.
We really will.
We will dig miles into the earth, build towering skyscrapers, exhaust our biological hardware, and even slaughter each other, all in service to an entity that possesses zero physical mass.
The astral plane dictates the physical plane. The decisions made in the conceptual data layer manifest as physical changes in the dirt and stone of the real world.
And if an egregore as massively powerful as the global financial system exists in that shared space, it isn't alone. The astral plane is crowded.
Very crowded.
You have national egregores, global religious god forms, sprawling political memeplexes. They are all sharing the same finite resource, human processing power.
And they are bound to collide. Which brings us to the ultimate conclusion of this framework. If these superorganisms are constantly fighting for mindshare and survival, then human history looks very different than what we were taught in school.
It does. The framework concludes that human history is not simply a record of kings, queens, and physical battles over geographic territory. History is the turbulent record of clashing egregores.
When two cultures go to war, we usually frame it as a conflict over physical resources. Land, oil, water. But this suggests that the physical conflict is secondary. The true war is a software conflict.
It's entirely a software conflict. It is a battle between two incompatible superorganisms running entirely different language operating systems.
Wow.
For one egregore to achieve dominance and guarantee its own survival, it cannot just defeat the physical bodies of its rival. It must overwrite, assimilate, or entirely destroy the symbolic code of the opposing network.
So the physical violence is just a byproduct.
Yes. The physical wars we fight, the blood spilled on the ground, are often just the biological hardware carrying out the grim execution commands of a software battle happening in the invisible memetic ecosystem. We are the living wetware through which these ancient, disembodied spirits think, act, and fight to survive across the millennia.
It's an incredibly heavy paradigm shift. Let's just trace the massive arc we've quickly covered today. We started with biological organisms bound strictly to the literal present. Then, humanity experienced a phase shift, the invention of symbolic displacement, allowing us to conceptualize the absent, the past, and the future.
Which changed everything.
It did, because this symbolic capability wasn't just a communication tool. It functioned as a literal operating system, installed into our wetware during the friction-filled years of childhood development.
And that operating system created an internal, virtual ecosystem. In that space, memetic programs, ideas, ideologies, what ancient traditions accurately described as spirits, began to evolve, mutate, and fight a brutal Darwinian war for our finite attention.
And when a master program wins that war and is shared across a network of minds, those human nodes link together to form a superorganism, an egregore.
A literal hive mind.
This metamind is so powerful it can overwrite our deepest biological survival instincts, commanding the collective body to act as one. And all of this coordination happens within the shared conceptual data layer, the astral plane, which we prove exists every single day when we trade biologically useless paper for real-world labor.
It is a framework that systematically breaks down the illusion of complete individual autonomy. It forces you to question the origin of your deepest convictions. Are you generating the thought, or is a highly evolved program executing its code through you?
And that is exactly what we are going to leave you to ponder today. Think about the language you were using to process this very conversation. You didn't invent it. It was installed in you. So the next time you find yourself absolutely consumed by an ideology or passionately defending a concept you cannot physically touch, consider the possibility that every time you speak, you might just be writing code to ensure the survival of an ancient entity that lives entirely inside the network of our minds. This has been The Deep Dive. Until next time.